Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTrek 2025. This is a BookTube event created by Vin at Revenant Reads to revel in Star Trek fiction, the vast ocean of Star Trek fiction that's out there. Uh, and for most of the summer, I have been revisiting Star Trek Voyager. I've watched all of the episodes. I've read most of the books, or reread most of the books. I even abortedly started my own Star Trek Voyager story, which has stalled. A number of you have said you'd like to see it continue. I do want to continue it. I still have the rest of the month of August to do so. I could extend it beyond BookTrek if I wanted to. Voyager is fascinating because it broke with precedent in a lot of ways from Star Trek, the original series, and Star Trek Next Generation. The main way is that it doesn't take place in the background of the Federation, or even the Alpha Quadrant. USS Voyager is flung across the galaxy by alien technology, so it's facing entirely new friends and enemies without any help, without any backup. It also had a female captain, Catherine Janeway, played by Kate Mulgrew, and a very strange crew. The intention of Star Trek The Next Generation was to create a strange core cast of characters. So not Jim Kirk's Enterprise, where it's a ship full of humans and one half Vulcan that we know of. I mean, we are told in innumerable Star Trek original series fan fiction and novels that Jim Kirk's Enterprise is actually teaming with aliens, but we don't see them in the original show. Whereas in The Next Generation, we get an odd crew. We get a crew member who is blind and uses mechanical apparatus to allow him to see. We get a crew member who is an android. We get a crew member who is a Klingon, and so on and so forth. And Voyager takes that up a notch completely. We get another Vulcan as a member of the bridge crew, but not this time. What I presume is a younger man and also a conflicted man. Spock is half human, and the two sides of his nature are at war with each other. Whereas Tuvok, the Vulcan in Star Trek Voyager, is 100-something years old and is not conflicted at all in his nature. He's 100% Vulcan. And we also get an alien resident of the Delta Quadrant, which is where Voyager finds itself, grafts himself onto the crew. Neelix becomes the cook and the morale officer. His girlfriend, adopted daughter, possession, I don't really know what you would call her, Cass, is also part of the crew for a while. And that was a wasted opportunity. Voyager is often criticized by Star Trek fans for being a place of wasted opportunities. And Neelix and Cass are very much wasted opportunities. They end up being just ordinary people when they're from 70,000 light years from Earth, entirely different set of references. They should feel more alien than they do. Same thing is true of Janeway's first officer, Chakotay, who was, until the end of the first episode of Voyager, a terrorist, a leader of the Maquis, a terrorist group fighting against both the Federation and the Cardassians. Janeway decides at the beginning that the best way for the two crews, Maquis and Starfleet, to get together and work together is if one of their own has a significant position of power. So she makes Chakotay her first officer over, for instance, Tuvok, the Vulcan, or anybody else on board. And that the full potential of both that and also the individual character of Chakotay is never really exploited. They're just, the writers, the showrunners just never seem to have time to do that. And the goal of the ship, of course, is to get back home. They have a dual goal. Their main goal is to get back home. Their secondary goal is that they're still, as Janeway often reminds people, they're still Starfleet officers. Their mission is still to seek out new life and new civilizations and to explore it. They're still an exploratory vessel, even though they are incalculably far from home. So far from home that the most that anyone on the crew thinks of is that they won't live to see it. Tuvok is a Vulcan. He will live long enough to see it, but most of them won't. The only other person on board, that original cast, that would live to see it would be the Doctor. Janeway's original doctor, the one assigned to her ship, is killed when the ship is flung across the galaxy. So they have to activate their emergency medical hologram, which is meant to be a backup doctor in sickbay, where there are hollow emitters constructed to allow it, this construction of solid light and whatnot, to help out when shorthanded. Only this doctor is the only doctor now. And he's wonderfully portrayed, wonderful personality, and he gets more and more complex as the show goes on. And he, of course, doesn't age at all. Tuvok does age, but he is twice the lifetime of a human being, whereas the Doctor doesn't age. So he could expect to see Homecoming. And the show gains pathos, I think, through that. I loved it. Right from the beginning, I loved it. And I was worried. Fans, the viewership was dipping a bit, and corporate decided the show needed a goose in popularity, that it needed an addition of some kind, and it chose an extremely beautiful young woman. To add an extremely beautiful young woman to the cast as a way of drawing in viewers, I guess. When I first heard it described that way in industry magazines, I thought the worst. I thought, oh my God, this is... Not only does that say bad things about the studio, it says bad things about the fans if it works. But the show cast a wonderful actress to play a character named Seven of Nine, who comes on in the 4th season of the show. She is a human being. She's a human who was assimilated by the Borg when she was a child and has grown up in the Borg collective. And she is separated from the collective when Voyager finds her, and gradually assimilates, no pun intended, to human society. She gradually regains her humanity. So she regains her hair. She swaps out her Borg body armor for a shiny one-piece skin-tight leotard suit. And as mentioned, she is quite stunning. The actress is quite stunning. But the job was also good. I need not have worried. The drama of Seven of Nine becoming human is extremely well done. And of course, like you, if you know the subject at all, you probably read rumors of tension on the set. Probably read rumors that Kate Mulgrew was not exactly peaches and cream to work with, and that she maybe especially resented the addition of this new character, who was obviously going to become a fan favorite and a large focus of the show. Maybe a lot of the other actors resented it too, since they were probably counting their lines as it was, and now had even less time. I don't really know how much of that is true, and I don't know how much of it we'll ever know. I'm sure that the Voyager set, like most sets of TV shows and movies, was flooded with NDA arrangements. I'm sure that the rotten stuff can't be spoken of. And really, would you want to? Would you want to speak of that stuff and jeopardize your standing in the very lucrative Star Trek convention circuit? The Star Trek Voyager crew of actors, when they get together at a convention, are hilarious. So it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of ill will being carried over there. So I assume, I like to think the best of the behind-the-scenes stuff. But for a large chunk of Voyager's runtime, it was one damn thing after another. It was a Planet of the Week, a Dilemma of the Week. The overall goal of the show was the same. We need to get home. We do have a plot, unlike, for instance, the original series, or even Next Generation for a while. We do have a plot on Voyager, an overarching plot, which is to get home. And we can play a lot with the ethical dimensions of that and the exigencies of that. But we'll mostly be encountering new things after another. There's only one overarching plot that the showrunners on Star Trek Voyager took their time getting to. And it came to its full fruition with the character of Seven of Nine. Because, of course, the one thing that we know before Voyager aired about the Delta Quadrant, where Voyager ends up, is that's the home of the Borg. And sure enough, Voyager encounters the Borg, and that becomes a running storyline of its own. As the ship, the Borg have transwarp capability. They have transwarp hubs and networks that would allow Voyager to get home instantly without taking the 70 years that it would require. And it sets up a running tension between Voyager and the Borg, and also the Borg Queen. uh, that ends. I don't want to spoil the show in case you haven't ever seen an episode of Voyager. It ends in victory for the good guys. And also to one of my favorite Star Trek memes on social media, where we are told that when Jean-Luc Picard goes to sleep at night, he has nightmares about the Borg, and when the Borg go to sleep at night, they have nightmares about Catherine Janeway. I like that. I like that. The captain who beat the Borg. Eventually, I mean, obviously I'm not spoiling anything here, eventually, Voyager gets home. When the show had good enough ratings so that at the halfway point when Jerry Ryan was brought on board as 7 of 9, the showrunners knew that they were going to get all the way to 7 seasons, which is the goal. That is syndication. That is all that sort of back end money. You don't want to get canceled before 7 seasons, and they knew they were going to get to 7 seasons, and they knew what the final moments of the final episode would have to be. You know that this was Hollywood, but this was before the goal of Hollywood was to identify what the viewers of your product, the most loyal fans of your show, want to see, and then intentionally don't give it to them. Intentionally don't do that. Fan baiting. Now that is the industry rule. But back when Voyager was made, no. It was, if you know what your fans want, well, then you have to pay off their loyalty by giving it to them. And that was a little odd. Star Trek Voyager shares that in common with Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where when the 7 seasons are over, you can't go back. You have looked at a bottle in time that is bottled on the front end and the back end, which wasn't true with the original series, and also wasn't true really with Star Trek The Next Generation, at least not on the small screen. Deep Space Nine ends. The space station is still there. The Federation is still running it. You could still have stories with some of the characters at the end of Deep Space Nine's TV run, but you couldn't have your core cast and all the fun that you had, all the interaction. You would have to introduce new people. And the same thing is true with Voyager. Voyager gets home. Well, when Voyager gets home, you can't expect that crew is going to stay together. They're not going to ship out on another vessel. They're not like the original crew. This has led to narrative challenges in the Star Trek fiction world. If you're going to write a Star Trek Voyager episode, well, if you're going to write a Star Trek Voyager novel, what do you do? There's a whole series of interconnected novels about what happens to Voyager and its crew after they get home, after that last TV episode. And all of those novels are connected, and they're all like the interconnected universe of the old Star Wars expanded universe, so that you need to read them. You need to read them all in order to understand what's going on. And they lack the narrative pizzazz, of course, of a starship alone and isolated on the other side of the galaxy. They lack that. And a lot that made Voyager special. So it's not being, fake nostalgia or closed-minded to say that without that element, you're missing something important from the Voyager recipe. So a lot of people also, in fan fiction sites and whatnot, will set their Voyager story during the time that Voyager was in the Delta Quadrant. You have to be a little careful. You can't mix up. And we know some of the things that happened in the Delta Quadrant, so you have to, if you're going to plunk your story down somewhere, you got to plunk it down carefully. No one has shown much interest in writing Voyager episodes, Voyager novels, or pastiche fiction set before the arrival of 7 of 9. Every writer seems to want to take a crack at her. So usually the timeline for Voyager fiction that is set in the Delta Quadrant, not the current story where Voyager goes back to the Delta Quadrant, but in you know what I mean, in the classic run of the show, usually that kind of fiction is set after the 4th season. And I've been reading a lot of that. I've been reading up on a lot of that in order to write my own. It's amazing how much ancillary reading you have to do if you want your Star Trek Voyager stuff to sound right. If you want your Star Trek fiction of any kind to sound right. It's amazing how much reading you have to do. I like it. It's not you don't have to read other people's stories, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to. It's one thing to sit and listen to a Star Trek Voyager episode where a character is blithely talking for a minute about a plasma manifold, but if you're going to have somebody talk about that in your own fiction, you have to know what it is. It's been fun. It's been a really good. I really should get back to my Voyager story. But in the meantime, I read some Voyager stories last night. Voyager comic books by IDW. I think this collection comes out next month. It's simply called the Star Trek Voyager Omnibus, and it's got this wonderful illustration of our core cast of characters minus Kes. Of course, since no one's interested in Kes. She was a dumb character. She wasn't a dumb character inherently. Inherently, she was very interesting. She was from a telepathic race of aliens in the Delta Quadrant who only live for a few years. They have a shorter lifespan than a dog. The Ocampa, when we come back to season 2 of Star Trek Voyager, Kes should have been acting and being portrayed and seeming like a woman on the borderline of middle age. That never happened. It was never dealt with at all. But anyway, there is Chakotay, the first officer. There is Tuvok. There, of course, is the mighty Captain Janeway. That is 7 of 9 with her Borg implant that you can see if the implants are up here. You have Lieutenant Paris, who was a big fan favorite, a daredevil. You have the half Klingon engineer, B'Elanna Torres, Harry Kim, perpetually Ensign Harry Kim. That is the holographic doctor. And there is the Delta Quadrant alien Neelix. And that is Voyager, shaped like a garden spade. And these are there are 2 main comic book stories here. And 2 shorter things. So the main one is called Seven's Reckoning. These do take place very much in the 4th season. The writer here, Dave Baker, was not really interested in writing about earlier Voyager. So this is a story, the Seven's Reckoning is a story where she is just assimilating, she is just getting used to Voyager, and comes face to face with another thing that Captain Janeway insists on erratically in the Delta Quadrant, which is the Prime Directive. Starfleet has the Prime Directive. We will not meddle in other societies unless they're ready for it, unless they volunteer for it. We won't show up in a primitive planet and make ourselves gods or anything like that. And it's well done. It's really interesting. So the second story is by Paul Allor. These are graphic novels. So the artwork for the first one is Angel Hernandez, and the artwork for the second one is J.K. Woodward. And I'll get to the artwork in a minute. The second story is Mirrors and Smoke, and it is much more interesting than Seven's Reckoning. There's a problem with people writing any kind of story about 7 of 9, whether it's a graphic novel or a novel or even a teleplay, is that you can't just rely on her backstory to make her interesting. You've got to make her interesting. That was the crucial decision that the actress, Jerry Ryan, made when she was portraying the character. She could easily have just relied on the backstory. And she doesn't do that. Instead, she gives us a human 7 of 9, a completely compelling performance. It doesn't, in case you're wondering where my loyalties lie, outclass Kate Mulgrew as Catherine Janeway. Nothing in all of Star Trek outclasses Katharine Hepburn as captain of a starship, but it comes close. But in Mirrors and Smoke, the ship does get flung across the galaxy, but it's an alternate ship. It's not the one we know. And Janeway is not she's a slave of the Cardassians, and the same alien MacGuffin gets them separated from the Alpha Quadrant, but this Janeway does not have Starfleet ideals to live up to. Instead, she decides, well, we'll mutiny, we'll take over the ship, and we'll take what we want. We'll become buccaneers. And it's pretty interesting. And then there are 2 smaller stories to round this out. One is the Wildman maneuver, a reference to Naomi Wildman, a child that's born on Voyager, born in the Delta Quadrant. And the other is Swift Spoke. And the shorter ones don't have a whole lot of weight to them. They didn't seem to me to have a whole lot of weight to them. The Wildman maneuver had a little gesture in a direction that I would love. I always think about the meta stories that could be told. about these original 5 Star Trek iterations. I always think about the fictions that could be told if, first of all, there was an audience, and there isn't anymore, and second, if the studio, the publishing arm of the studio, had any kind of risk or adventureness to them to write things. I mean, no one's ever going to do a Star Trek Voyager show again, so why not write whatever you want? In other words, the story that I would love to see, the novel that I would love to see, is Naomi Wildman, a half human, half Qatari girl who becomes a young woman who grows up. I would love to see her write her story of growing up on Voyager. That would be wonderful. I would like the same thing with Jake Sisko, who actually does become a writer in show continuity. I would love it if somebody would publish his story of Deep Space Nine. That would be great. But it wouldn't have to be Naomi Wildman. It could be the Doctor himself, who also has writing pretensions. It could be that he writes his story about being on Voyager. I mean, that would be, if it were done well, an extended comedy routine. Because we know from Star Trek Voyager, from a few episodes, that the Doctor loves to exaggerate his own heroicism. He loves to do that. And so a novel written that way could be really good if it were well done. But anyway, the 2 main stories in this collection were good. I, of course, missed them. I don't go to the comic shop every week, so I don't know if IDW still has the rights to Star Trek franchises. I have no idea, and I wouldn't see them anyway because I don't go to the comic shop. So these were all new to me, and they were good. Especially the alternate one, Mirrors and Smoke, was my favorite. But they betray the limits, the problems with Star Trek comic books. Like IDW, I think it was IDW that just did recently a run of the original series to round out. Famously, Kirk's Enterprise says at the beginning of every episode that it's on a 5-year mission. And yet we don't see the end of the mission. The show was canceled. Don't blame me. I wrote a million letters. I tried as hard as I could, but the show was canceled. So we never got the final year of the Star Trek Enterprise. And IDW, I think it was IDW just recently, did a long run showing Kirk and Spock and McCoy having adventures after the final episode that aired on TV. And it was good. It was good, but it has the same problem as these stories do, as any Star Trek does. It's only when you look at Star Trek transported to comic books that you realize how much of every episode of every show is people sitting around talking. Now, that makes perfect sense. People doing anything else is expensive. It's expensive. Special effects don't grow on trees. But that doesn't work in a comic book. And also, another thing that is a problem here is that all the people sitting around talking are actual people. So, what do you do if you're going to do a comic book? You have to make them look like they're real people. And comic book characters, without that, don't look like real people. They look like extremely idealized people. So, unless you're Gene Colan, or something like that. In other words, it would be possible to do a comic book with this crew that would look a lot better than any comic book adaptation that's been done so far, but you would have to abandon photorealism. And no one wants to do that. And the producers of these things are assuming that fans of these shows won't want to look at them unless they look like the characters that they're fans of. As a result, the artwork in here, no matter what, no matter who's doing it, is a little jerky, a little static, a little awkward. The cover is great. But the artwork is a little awkward. And that's no small criticism because it's a comic book. So the artwork means a lot. I enjoyed it very much so. I think there's a large amount of potential for inserting adventures into the Delta Quadrant continuity without disrupting that continuity at all. I think it's obvious when you're watching a lot of Voyager episodes, even after season 4. I think it's obvious that in between the closing credits of the episode you watched last week and the opening scene of the episode you're watching this week could have been who knows how many adventures. I like that. That it shares that in common with the original series. So I'm not just saying this for self interest reasons, since I am writing one of those stories myself. But there's a lot you could fit in there, and these authors do that. Dave Baker especially is really good. Gets everybody right, gets all the characters right. So I enjoyed this. So I don't know if I'm going to continue with Voyager for BookTrek, but I'm back on track for BookTrek, for making videos anyway. I've been reading Star Trek nonstop. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTrek.